like it's time for a personal update. I don't do a ton of timeline sharing of things happening in my life, or really haven't done very many updates at all since one of the biggest transitions in December of last year when my daughter passed away. And I want to, in this episode, just not assume that you really know anything about me, or assume that you don't really know anything about me, and give you like a very brief overview of who I am and what I'm doing here. Why do I even have a podcast? And what the last 4 months have been like since my daughter passed away. So I became an entrepreneur by starting a very small business when my littlest guy was 6 months old. So I have 3 children. And I started a decorating business just because I needed, like some type of creative outlet, something to do for me, something that I had control over. Because as anyone who has children will tell you, it's just chaos. Like all the time, it's chaos. And I had 3 kids, and at the time they were 6 months, 5 years old, and 8 years old. 2 girls and a boy. And so I started this journey into entrepreneurship. And what I discovered about having a business, building a business, growing a business, was how much it required me to know a lot about myself. I was not prepared for that. And it has been a beautiful byproduct of just trying something so outside of my comfort zone, so out of my wheelhouse, and learning how to not only develop skills, but become the kind of person who could have a successful business. So I grew that business from just a decorating business into an interior design business. I was doing whole home renovations, furniture, tile, kitchens, bathrooms. And then I also had a store, which I sold furniture and home decor out of, which was absolutely beautiful. I stopped all of that last year, 2022, for a number of reasons, one of which was because I didn't find the kind of soul satisfaction that I was really wanting within that industry. The decision to do such a significant pivot is also because of the diagnosis of my daughter, and knowing that I probably really didn't have that much time left with her. She got a diagnosis when she was 3 of mucopolysaccharidosis type 3A, which is also called Sanfilippo syndrome. And she effectively lost every skill that she had gained in the first 4 or 5 years of her life. So eating, talking, walking, running, memorizing the alphabet, knowing her colors, holding conversations, singing, memorizing songs, all of that. She's slowly lost all of those skills due to this disease. And that particular type of MPS has a life expectancy of mid-teens. And so I knew that this was coming for her at some point. I just didn't know when. Last year, Annie had 2 hospital stays in the ICU because of respiratory illness. And those are very difficult things to go through as a parent, to watch your child be hooked up to machines and have medications and sedations. And it's a very traumatic thing to witness, and to be in charge of making decisions for life-saving medical interventions. The last time that she was hospitalized in July of last year, we realized that the next respiratory illness that she got, if it was anything like the previous 2, that it was going to require some pretty serious medical intervention. And we decided to not continue to intervene in the same way. And that decision was extraordinarily difficult. I can't even explain how difficult that is, to know that there is something that you can do but that it may not be the best thing because extending life is not as important from my perspective if it's going to decrease the quality of life. I don't think that just continuing to do things to her body to keep her alive was really serving her in the best way. And we decided we're going to intervene to this point and not past that point. And that was so difficult, but it was after that hospital stay that I started to just fight to get things in order so that she could die at home, knowing that, hopefully that's a ways off. Hopefully that's not going to happen for a while, but I'm going to get these things in place now so that when the time comes, we'll be ready. I'm as ready as you can be for something like that. So when Annie died in December, it all happened really quickly. Our whole family had kind of, except for her, had gotten this nasty bug, and we were sick for about a week, really sick. And Annie didn't get sick, and I thought, okay, maybe she's somehow escaped this. And we all got better, and it was like that day that she came down with something that was on a Monday. And then through that week, things just got worse and worse. And by Friday, we knew that this was it. And she died on Sunday morning, December 4th. So today, that I'm recording this on April 4th, has been 4 months since she passed away. And these last 4 months have been so weird, so bizarre. The first, I would say 2 months have felt like just kind of doing the necessary things. So, like planning a celebration of life, informing people that she died, getting her ashes from the mortuary, stopping medical services, telling the medical supply company we didn't need any more food supplies. We didn't need any more medications. And, having to deal with things like her equipment company calling me and telling me that after a 9-month wait that her stroller was finally ready, her new wheelchair was finally ready, and having to tell her we don't need it anymore. God, that sucked. So the first couple of months were just kind of all of those like necessary things. And I thought it was so weird. Like some of it it was surprising how normal I felt. And then there would be days where it just all hit me and I couldn't think about things in the same way. And grief had really like taken away some of my ability to think clearly and to make plans and to set goals for myself or to really think long term. It was like everything was very present. And I thought, I was doing okay. And then I would say probably 6 to 8 weeks ago, like everything started to come to the surface. So everything that just didn't have space yet to be addressed was bubbling up. So a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, and not just things around missing Annie, but it seemed like it's almost like the places that have been the safe houses for anger or sadness or grief for a lot of things in my life were blown open. And so not only was I dealing with the grief with Annie, but grief over a lot of other things that have happened over the last several years. I didn't and still don't have an answer to this question that has plagued me for the last 10 years of when Annie dies, am I going to be okay? I don't know. I don't even know what okay looks like. I do know that I right now need additional support. So I started to put some things in place because I could feel my inability to manage what was happening internally on my own. So I got, a therapist and am doing some other things that are helping me cope with this big grief and this big change and this big shift in my identity. I had so much of my schedule and so much of my life was rotating around Annie's needs that when that wasn't there anymore, it feels very unmooring. Like I don't, it almost was like I had this orbit around her and the gravity of her and her needs and her diagnosis kind of kept me on this trajectory that I could anticipate. And now that that pull isn't there anymore, I feel like what is there? What is tying me to that, I guess, to that part of myself in the same way? I realized that, I probably can always say I'm a mother of a child that's disabled, or I have a daughter with a rare disease, but it's different now because she's not living. And so what part of my identity is no longer relevant? And what new part of my identity do I have now that is a parent who has lost a child? I've really been mulling over this concept of identity for a long time. As I have changed, as my circumstances have changed, as the people who need me have changed and grown and their needs have changed, this this understanding of like my identity still is something that has been manufactured in a way. My identity is in a response to my environment and to what people need from me and how other people perceive me and how they have known me in the past. And identity death is one of the most difficult things to go through, one of the most difficult transitions to go through. Because if we have our sense of self and our sense of purpose and our sense of who we are in the world wrapped up in this identity or this personality, then when something big shifts, like losing a child, the identity kind of falls apart. So, what a lot of these last couple of weeks in particular have been like for me is becoming a more attuned observer of what is happening in me. This is not easy, and it is kind of scary to wear the mantle of curiosity. And I am kind of surprised by that actually, because I do find myself naturally being such a curious person who has a lot of bandwidth to try new things and to fail. But the difference in this level of curiosity and observation for myself is that I have never felt this level of sadness and grief before. And there's a part of me that's very resistant to letting it be what it is because it does feel like I don't know what's going to happen if I let myself feel everything that I'm really feeling. If I don't let myself grieve to grieve all the way. There are times when I have felt these memories come up, particularly around that last week of Annie's life, or memories of the last time that she was in the ICU and we made some really hard choices and had just the hard experience of, even just listening to a heart monitor and watching O2 stats, the sounds of that, the smells of a hospital. I can't even drive around in downtown Portland in that area because I just feel this overwhelm of anxiety because it's in the area that we were for 2 weeks while she was on a ventilator. So the fear of letting myself feel to the maximum everything that's coming up is new. And I just started reading a really helpful book by Ram Dass, and I oh, I cannot remember the title of it, but he wrote a book about aging and death. And, I'm not that old. I'm 39. I don't consider myself, like middle age or on the backside of my life or anything. But so much of what he writes in there is so profound and so important at any stage. He talks a lot about our aging bodies and how they start to sag and wrinkle and color differently, get the age spots and the crow's feet and all of that, and how to make peace with the fact that our bodies are a temporary container for this eternal soul. And being able to read some of his words about how much the ego resists the awareness that we are one is such a fascinating concept to think about. So, how this relates to what I'm talking about is that anytime we have resistance or fear that is driving our relationships, particularly our relationship with ourself, it's worth investigating. What are we fearful of? I find myself being fearful of losing control. I find myself being fearful of the depth of the sadness that I'm capable of. And even though I intellectually know through my experience, some of the really hard experiences, that even the most intense moments of grief do not last forever. They are temporary. I still find myself in a place of like serious resistance to feeling those because it doesn't feel good. And I like to feel good. I don't want to feel the sadness, and I don't want to feel the anger, and I don't want to feel the yearning, and I don't want to feel the loss, and I don't want to feel the grief. There are a lot of moments where I let myself do that. I let myself feel how I'm feeling and end up, crying or screaming or punching my steering wheel. I cry in my car a lot. And even those moments are still just temporary. They're moments. They're not days and weeks. It's when we resist what we're feeling is when it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So I have decided that I am going to put in a serious effort to embracing joy. That effort requires me to not run away from what I'm feeling, which seems really counterintuitive, I suppose, to say, like, if I'm going to fight for joy, that I have to let myself be sad. But it's true. It's the really difficult paradox of emotion that in order to feel one, in order to feel relief, you actually have to feel it in order to feel that, like, that comes after a big emotional release through crying or through anger, through, swearing or yelling or screaming or shaking. In order to feel that relief, you have to go through the thing. The only way to develop patience is to be in circumstances that test your patience, that are really annoying or really slow or are really, what's the word I'm looking for? That are really inconvenient. You have to go through those stuff to actually develop that patience. And if I want to develop my ability to continue to feel joy, I have to let myself go through the really deep spots. I just do. Like, there's no way to avoid it. And it's a practice and it's a skill and it's a choice over and over and over again to allow myself to feel the depths of whatever I'm feeling. And even though I'm afraid of, if I look into those places or remember the things that are really hard, if I allow fear to take the wheel here, then I'm going to be on a completely different path. I'm not willing to do that. I spent a lot of years stuffing down how I was feeling, ignoring how I was feeling, numbing how I was feeling, and it did not go well. It turned out very, very poorly. My body knew that I was not addressing the things I needed to address. So I don't even really have like big takeaways, I suppose, for this episode, other than just letting it be a personal journal entry of sorts to say, this is where I've been. This is where I've been most recently. And this is what's happening now. And this is what my plan is going forward, to continue to fight for what I know is possible in my life, to continue to fight for better relationships in my life with others and with myself, continuing to fight for what I knew was true about Annie, and that makes me sure about other people, that at our core, beneath all the layers of identity, our personality, our ego, what we think we should be in the world, beneath all of that is a person who is worthy and loved, lovable, able to love. Beneath all of that is wholeness. So I want to continue to fight to remember that every single day, and to embrace that I get to have this body that feels all that I'm feeling in the way that it does, because emotion is energy in motion. Emotion is vibrations in our body. Emotion are certain sensations in particular places, and that can vary from person to person. Sometimes the grief sits in my stomach and knots it up. Sometimes it sits right here in my chest and just feels constricted and tight and stormy. And sometimes the grief sits in my throat, makes it difficult to talk. It's like it's kind of like when you feel like you're going to cry and you get all choked up. That's what that is. That's that energy, that emotional energy that's actually moving in your body. And a great way to manage your emotions is to notice how it feels. Where does it show up in your body? What are the sensations? And to let yourself feel it all the way through. So this is my practice. This is my commitment, is to allow myself to feel everything that I'm feeling, feel it all the way through, and give it a place to go. That in honoring Annie's life and her legacy is that I would continue to reach for every day being full of love and connection, because that was the only thing that I could do for Annie. I couldn't do anything to change her disease. I couldn't do anything to slow it down, really. I couldn't do anything to cure it. And so it was like, if I can't do any of those things, and if she is unable to do many of the things that a normal 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old can do, what can I still guarantee for her day? That she would know that she is loved, and that she would get to do things every day that make her feel more alive. So I take that template for her life and I apply it to mine. And I say, okay, every day, what are the practices that I can do that make me feel loved, that make me feel connected, and that bring me a lot of joy? And I understand what it feels like to just be tired, to feel like I don't have anything else in me that is able to fight for that. But you have to. And I'm saying this to myself, Morgan, you have to. You have to keep fighting for it. You have to find those places in yourself that know that that is real, that the joy is real, and that the pursuit of living whole is worth it. It's worth it. So continue to fight, my friends. Even if you're tired, continue to fight for joy, continue to fight for connection, for love, for understanding that you are whole. Before we go, P.S. Be inspired.